Well, hi there and welcome. I'm Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations, and I'm so glad that you're able to join me today. We are going to be making over this old antique book cabinet. Now, there's a couple of things about this. I don't know yet exactly what I'm doing with this, in which case I'm leaving some options open to see how the piece develops. A couple of things that we will start with. I've already washed it all down, so I've already kind of degreased it, cleaned the dust off it, that sort of thing. But some of the other prep work that I need to do is I want to remove the fret, right? This wooden decorative inside trim. I may or may not be using that. I'm not sure yet. It really depends upon what happens with the inside, and in particular the back panel. If I end up doing something kind of decorative back there, then I won't want to put the fret back in so that you can see that. If I don't do that, then I will want to paint out the fret and put it back in. Either way, especially because I'm going to want to paint it rather than just leaving it the plain brown look, I need to remove it. So it has this small little trim around here that is kind of added in with teeny tiny little nails. And so it takes a little bit of wiggling. I just usually take I was gonna call this a spatula. Oh Lord, I've been cooking too much. Okay, so I just usually take it and kind of gently start to pry up and loosen this piece, and I'll take you in closer. The other thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this back panel off, and again, it's nailed into the back. It's going to remove easily, but it does mean it's going to be so much easier to paint it out or to do something decorative. So even if I'm just painting it a flat color, it's way easier to get a nice smooth coat on it if it's removed and then just add it back in. So I'm going to remove this trim and the fretwork. I'm going to remove the back, and then because it's a really old piece, I don't know where it's been. I don't want to have bleed through after I work on all my decorative finish. I am going to give it a coating of Salvation solution, and I'm doing it in clear, so when it's dry, you're actually not going to be able to tell that I did it. But what it does do is it's going to serve as a blocker. There's no smell to this piece, but I really don't know if it's going to bleed through, and it's just better safe than sorry. It's going to prevent any of that staining or bleed through from coming through my piece, which is can make my life easier later on if it decided to do that. So I'm going to remove all of the pieces I need to. I'm going to give it a coat of Salvation solution, and then we'll get going with the fun stuff, which is the painting and really updating this, even though I'm probably going to do like an old world kind of look to it, but it's going to brighten it up for sure. I have my Salvation solution on the entire piece, and I did put it on the fretwork, on a little bit of trim that I took off, and on the backing board as well, just because I don't want to go through all this trouble and then have those little pieces bleed through. I'm going to put a first coat, a base coat of DIY Sandy Blonde, which is kind of like a beigey, like kind of color. As a base coat, you can kind of see this going on. It's going to be a neutral, and especially when I don't really know what I'm doing yet, I like starting with neutrals that I then could kind of take in whatever direction that I want to go. So as a start, this is a good one. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to paint the door front and back, but I'm not going to be painting the inside of my cabinet or my shelves. There are 4 shelves that go with this. until my piece is done. So until I know what the outside's gonna look like and what kind of look I want on the inside. So I'm gonna save that for last. Just again, sometimes I do it first, sometimes during. It all really depends upon where my vision is at. My vision is nowhere. So I'm gonna save that to do something that works with and complements the finish that I come up with for this one. Rather than jumping right in too early and doing it too soon. So I'm just going to carry on, and I'm gonna get my base coat on, and I'm deliberately kind of going in this neutral sort of earth tony kind of look, because I'm going to be layering and adding more colors, and this is going to work with some of that older kind of worn sort of look that I'm after, and I don't use it that much, so I'm kind of challenging myself to use some of the colors that I have that I don't tend to pull off as often, just to get to be familiar with them and what they look like. So, you know, it's kind of not a bad thing to do sometimes, is to challenge yourself to kind of use colors that you're not typically familiar with or that you don't use as often, just to see about new looks so you don't get into a bit of a rut. So I'm breaking out of my comfort zone, starting with Sandy Blonde, and we'll see where it takes us. Hey there. All right, we have a plan. We've got our base coat on. This is our Sandy Blonde, right? What I'm looking at doing now, I know that I didn't really have too many thoughts, and not in general, just as it relates to this piece, but I kind of have a thought now. I have done a previous piece, a little bit higher here. I've done a previous piece in kind of an old world look where it was nothing but washes, and you can see like I've just got one light coat of this on, so I have not worried about perfect coverage. I haven't, you know, done two coats really heavy, and what we're looking at doing is just putting on multiple layers of color in washes. Now, the last time I did this, it was on a buffet, and I sprayed all of the different layers with a hand sprayer. That was painful, and that took a long time. So we're going to use a brush this time. But what I'm looking at doing is doing different layers of color. So my next color, so we've got Sandy Blonde from DIY. I'm going to use all DIY paint. The next layer is going to be Apothecary. So it's kind of a greeny tone, and I may go back and do additional layers of some colors. So that's possible too. So I'm just pouring some out. You can't see because it's down the floor, but I'm just pouring some out into the same bowl that I had my Sandy Blonde in, because it'll be okay. And I'm adding a fair bit of water. So I want it to be pretty loose. Now DIY has a lot of pigment in it, so that's in my favor, but you're gonna see that this is not going to give full and complete coverage, and I'm actually gonna add just a tinge more water. So you can see, look how loose that is. So DIY is a really thick paint. This is pretty watery. But all I'm looking at doing, and I'm taking a flat kind of synthetic brush here, and I'm just going to add a quick wash of color. I don't even need it to be perfect. All right, so I don't, because I'm using a lot of water in this coat, I don't want to be painting over this a lot, because this is so wet, it's going to reactivate my Sandy Blonde below. And I don't want to be taking that paint off. I want to be layering my paint on. So I am just going to do like super, super fast coats, and you can see it's not perfect coverage. And that's okay, because I've got 1, 2, 3. I mean, I'm probably gonna be adding petticoat pink. I'm probably gonna be adding French millinery. I'm gonna be adding a gray, like gray, probably skeleton key, letterpress gray. I don't know, one of them. I might have to lighten it up even more, and I may do the green again. So, and I may do any of those colors again. So, I don't mind if it's not hitting every spot as I do this, because the other colors will do it. And I want a chance for some of these other colors to kind of shine through a little bit without the necessity for all of it to be sanded. So this is gonna be a really fast painting, right? This is gonna dry really quite quickly. So I'm going to do that same treatment to the top and the other side and the front. I still have not painted the inside or the shelves, because or the back, because I'm still waiting to see what the overall look of this is. What I am thinking is that depending upon what my final color is, I may finish with kind of that gray and then do some additional antiquing, in which case I may go for either that same gray on the inside, or maybe I want to pick up like the light pink, muted down a little bit, maybe kind of a grayish pink. I don't know. We'll see, but I want to wait and go with whatever the final look of this looks like, and then worry about the inside. So it's going to play off on that, because we want this finish to be kind of highlighted a little bit. So stay tuned. That's coat number 2. We've got our base coat of Sandy Blonde. We've got our wash of Apothecary. I'm going to carry on with that, come back at you for the next layer on here. All right. My green coat, my Apothecary coat, has dried, and I've now mixed up my petticoat pink. Now, I had just a little bit of it left in my FIFO bottle, so I added some water, shook it around, and then dumped it out. So it's going to be fairly thin, and I probably need more on than just the fluff. And I'm just going to do the same thing, kind of some light coats of this, and try to hit some spots where, again, you know, I've got colors in between. So I'm not looking to get it all. I'm just kind of filling in a little bit here and there. And I'm going to do this over the whole thing. So don't be afraid for it to look sort of patchy right now. And with where we're going, we're not looking for that complete coverage. You can see that I've still got some of that kind of that golden color from the Sandy Blonde coming through. And we've got the green. And we're just kind of covering this. Time for the next layer. Now, I will say this. It's easier close up to be able to see some of the distinctions. And DIY paint dries lighter. So when you're doing a technique like this, and especially when you're doing it with DIY, don't make the mistake of thinking, like right now it looks all really pale and you don't see the colors. There's a lot more color happening than you think. And don't deliberately go and try and thicken up or darken your washes, thinking that's not happening. So this wash is French Millinery, which is kind of a soft lavender sort of color, right? And we're just going to be dragging it on. What I am going to be doing is I'm going to do French Millinery. I'm then going to do another kind of really light coat of the Apothecary, just to bring a little bit of that green back in. And then we'll be doing light gray. So we've still got a little bit to go. And it might seem might seem like a lot. You guys can decide at the end if you think it's worth it or not. But it's really, they're very soft, very thin. They dry very quickly, layers. I could have done this all in one day. I mean, obviously I'm wearing a different top, so you know it's not the same day. But that's more because I'm doing it here in the shop, and I got shop hours, and I got other stuff that I'm doing. So the only reason that all those layers didn't get done at once is because I had other things. I had other things to do. All right, so that's that. And the next green one. All right, final coats of paint on the outside of my cabinet. And what I have done is I have taken the lightest of the DIY grays, which is Gravel Road, added a little bit of white to it to lighten it up even further, and then I have really thinned it out. So I want to have kind of the gray on the outside, but I am planning on sanding to reveal some of these colors, which will come through when I seal it. And so I would rather put two really thin coats of the gray on than one thick coat and kind of negate all of the layering that I've done. So I've watered it down quite a bit, and I've lightened it a bit just because I didn't want this piece to be too dark. I want it to be a light enough color that some of these colors will echo through even if I haven't sanded down to them. And I know that might sound a little weird, but always your undercolors will kind of create a tonal variation with whatever your upper colors are, especially if your upper colors stay light. I mean, obviously if I'm painting black, nothing's echoing through the black. But I'm just going to be adding this on, and I am really just skimming my brush over it because I don't want to, I mean, these are such thin layers and this is so wet. I don't want to be dragging off any of the colors that are below. So you can see how I'm taking my brush on an angle to the surface, really almost parallel to it, just so that I'm not pushing at all, just really lightly dragging the paint on. So again, I'm gonna do this all over the piece. And on this one, I'm looking at kind of getting a full coverage. If I have to do kind of a touch up on one additional layer, I will. But I'm just looking for it to kind of, what's going to happen is from a distance, it's going to look like it's a gray piece. But when we get up close, you're going to be able to see that there's more happening below the surface. Our piece has its coat of gray. And I ended up doing one coat and then just a little bit of a touch-up coat. So you can see it all looks kind of a solid gray. If I waxed it or sealed it right now, you'd have small little echoes of the colors beneath. What I want to do is reveal more of those. So I'm going to sand it, but I am going to use a really light touch. It's not going to sound like it, but I have 320 grit sandpaper, so very fine, because these are really thin coats. And anything harder than that, and you go whoosh right down to the base coat, you get down to the wood. So what you're looking at doing is just kind of lightly taking that paper. You can feel immediately the difference between where you sanded, where you didn't. And what I'm going to do is just watch closely as I sand for when I start to see hints of that color. Again, because this is DIY, all the colors seemed a little bit pale and light anyway. What's going to happen is they'll darken and you'll see some of those colors echo up through. once we add our wax on. But at this stage, you're just kind of using a light touch, and you're looking for some of those colors to start peeking through. When you like what you see, then you're done. And we'll wipe down, get all the dust off it, and then we'll come back to seal. This has been sanded down, dusted off, and we're now going to apply the wax. Now, this is a subtle finish. I'm not sure how much the camera is going to pick up because of the big overhead lights here in my shop. But we are going to kind of add our wax, and I'm just using DIY wax in clear for this part. And when I'm waxing, because I want to get a nice even coat, I tend to swirl it and then take it down in the direction of the grain. So you can see immediately that this is starting to darken up. But what I'm hoping that you can see, I mean, you're not going to be able to see probably on the camera there the individual colors, but you're probably seeing, picking up that it's got some depth to it beyond just being a light gray. So when I'm up close, I can kind of subtly see there's a little bit more of like the pinky mauve tones here. There's a little bit of the yellow showing. Right in here is a little bit of the green, some green coming in down there. So it's not a bold, in your face kind of finish. And I get that. And I get that, you know, the big kind of Facebook scroll stopping photos are all super dramatic finishes. But here in my shop, those are lovely. Those get comments. They may get likes and shares, but they don't get sold. They're a tougher sell. So sometimes you want to do pieces that, one, people are going to want to buy, but really the people are truly going to love to add into their homes. This kind of finish is more than just a plain gray. It's got a softness and richness to that overall gray look that, for me, is a lot more satisfying. It adds more to it, and it gives it more of that aged sort of European kind of look, because it's like people have been using and loving it as yellow for a lot of years, and then they painted it this soft green, and then they used it and loved it for decades, and then they painted it a soft pink, and they used it and loved it. And it's just got that kind of old time-worn, soft, classic, never going out of style kind of look to it. So I'm going to carry on, and I will get some close-up pictures and see if I can capture some of what's going on for it. But know that if you're looking for a little bit of that depth and a little bit of that soft kind of variation with this, without this big dramatic finish, then layering soft washes over top of each other is what's going to do it. So I'm going to finish waxing this. When it dries overnight, I will buff it out, but there's no big urgency in that because we still have the inside and the shelving to get to. So pretty much we're only halfway there, but the inside is going to be a lot more straightforward. So it won't take us as long. What I've decided on this piece for the inside, the shelves, and the backing is that we are going to do it in a really soft tone of French millinery, which means I'm going to start with white. So I'm still considering doing something to the back and possibly like a stencil. So if I do that, if that's the way I go, I'm going to do it in a slightly darker color of the French millinery. So what I need to do is mix up enough paint that I can do all those pieces. So we'll do the shelving. Now, here's the thing about the shelves though. because I'm going to be adding paint to this side, already I'm making the space for the shelves smaller. These are shelves that they've got little holes here that we put the clips in and they rest on. But if I paint the edges of the shelves, let me grab one. So you can see that they've left that part unfinished. And that's for a very good reason. Because when we go to rest it in here, there is not tons of space for it. If I paint this and I paint that, I'm creating even less space, which means when I go to fit these in, they're not going to, I'm going to have to scrape them down, which means I'm now going to scratch off all of the paint. So I'll be painting the top and the bottom, that little front edge, but I'm going to be leaving the rest unpainted. And I just thought, I mean, to me that makes sense, but I thought I'd mention it to y'all in case you would automatically just paint the whole thing and then discover afterward, oops, that doesn't work. So I'm adding the French millinery in here. And I'm just creating a really soft kind of mauve color. So you can see this is very pale, but it's going to work against our backdrop, and you can see how much lighter it is than this color here, which is likely what we would stencil with if we're doing that. So I am just simply going to paint. It was the easiest way to do it. I'm just going to paint the inside, up the sides, ceiling, and the backing board and those shelves. So I'm going to get 2 coats on there. I will lightly sand them and then seal them with wax, and then seal them with wax also. So when I next see you, this will be painted, sanded, and sealed, and then I'll be back at you with the backing board. Hey there. Okay, I've gotten all the inside drying, all the shelves. They've all got 2 coats on it, as well as this backboard. So this is all done with the French millinery from DIY, lightened up with a bunch of beadboard. So it's a very, very pale kind of mauve, almost looks a little bit kind of mauvey gray. What I'm going to do now is I have this stencil, don't know where the heck I got it, and it's ancient. I've had it forever, and it's well used. So all that I've done is I've kind of mapped out the midpoint of the board. I'm going to drop this down just a little bit because it's going to go against the backing. And I'm going to start stenciling. And I'm just eyeballing, so it's a little crooked. So I'm going to stencil this, probably one here. I probably get maybe half down at the bottom, and then I'll maybe do like half of it off to the side on things. And I am going to just use for this the last of my full strength French millinery. So it's just going to have that darker mauvey gray look to it. And for stenciling, you can see that I dipped and then offloaded my brush. And I'm just going to kind of pounce this in. This is a fairly thick stencil, almost like, almost as thick like the Jamie Ray Vintage stencils that I carry in the shop. Okay, that's about there. Moment of truth. And there we have it. So these are going to look nice and soft. It's not going to be too bold sticking out in behind. just lovely. I love the colors, so I love the detailing on this. I'm gonna carry on and get the next ones on there. And then I'm gonna seal up all the interior and the shelving of everything. So give everything a light sand just to smooth it, lightly distress it, and then I'll come back at you so that we can start assembling it all together again. One last little thing that I'm gonna do is I'm taking my mostly dry stencil brush, and I'm just going to kind of almost dry brush down around the edges of my fret. I'm not convinced I'm using the fret yet, but I do want it to be a little bit more interesting. I haven't sanded this yet, but what I am doing is just kind of dragging that mostly dry brush around it, adding just a little bit of that darker French millinery just around the edges. I'm gonna do this on both sides because you're gonna see it from both sides, whether the cabinet is open or closed. So if I decide to use it, I will like it better. So I don't know if you can kind of see some of the marks. It just adds a really subtle. Okay, I'm recognizing that it's subtle, but so is the finish on the outside of our piece, right? Well, this is our little shelf so far. You can see our stenciling in the back. We've got our 3 shelves in. You can see the different tone, right? This is a little bit more greeny gray, and this is a little bit more of that light plum. The last piece to do is to put our glass in. So this glass started out with a little crack in the bottom, which means it's still got a little crack at the bottom. So I'm being a little careful with it because I'm not replacing the glass. I figure if anybody wants to pay for that, they can replace the glass themselves. So, all right, phew, glass is in. And now, I have to see which side I like best. That side out. I mean, you're going to see both sides, but just, you know. So I have to kind of see. If I like it with the fret. I could sort of go either way. But I think I'm going to leave the fret. Okay, so the fret goes in. And then we start taking our trim and adding it back in. This is where sometimes I wish I had more people in the shop with me. It's like, okay, I need my hands. All right, so we're just gonna take this and push it back up in. I just wanna make sure that that curve, this bottom piece started right at the bottom. So I'm gonna do the same, and I'm gonna start to lightly tap my nails in, and then this baby will be done, and I'll get it staged up and give you some pics. But that's it. Yay! Here's our finished little bookcase. Keep in mind that, you know, finishes like this, and I'll take some close pictures for you to be able to see some of the detail. Like here we've got some streaks of yellow coming through. Up close you can kind of see this looks a little bit more of that soft green than just straight gray, but it does create a neutral piece because from a distance it has that gray factor. On the inside has a little bit of a switch up and you can kind of see some of the contrast. This is in that pale apothecary. You know, we blended it with the white to be able to soften it. We've got a little bit of the stronger apothecary in the back, but again, it all kind of blends, it all kind of works. I'm gonna be trying to do a little bit more of the furniture refinishing on the channel for you, depending upon how the pieces and the time goes. Sometimes, you know, if I'm doing custom work, I'm just trying to get it out. But where I have a chance, where I've got some of the time, I will definitely be able to kind of spend some time, show you, give you some little tips, maybe some different looks and things to be able to try. For the paint and products, well, mostly today it was just paint and waxes and things. You can go to queenbeecreationshome.com. And apart from that, I look forward to seeing you on the channel for the next one. Take care.